Whether you're making a simple cup of coffee or running some super complex data analysis, it turns out they all follow the exact same unbreakable pattern. So today, let's dive into this really fundamental idea: input, process, and output. But first, let's start with a problem I'm sure we've all seen. A data project that has all this promise, right? But in the end, it just spits out results that are confusing, or worse, results nobody trusts. It's super common and incredibly frustrating. And the reason, a lot of the time, comes down to a misunderstanding of the simple chain we're about to break down.
Okay, so at the very heart of any system, you've got this three-link chain: input, process, and output. Now, the most important thing to get here is that if even one of these links is weak, the whole system just collapses. It's an all-or-nothing deal. So let's take a look at each link, one by one, starting with the foundation.
That first link is the input. And listen, this isn't just where things begin, it is the absolute bedrock that everything else gets built on. Seriously, if you mess this part up, nothing that comes after it can ever really be trusted. It's that simple and it's that critical.
So, what do we mean by input? Well, it's your raw material. For data analysis, this could be anything: customer transaction logs, survey answers, readings from a sensor. It's basically all the stuff you feed into the system before any of the real work starts.
But here's the thing. Not all inputs are created equal. For an input to be strong, it has to be accurate, obviously, it has to be correct. It needs to be complete, meaning no big chunks of information are missing, and it's got to be timely, so it's actually relevant. But maybe the most important, and honestly the most overlooked attribute, is governance. This is all about having clear rules and ownership over your data before it even gets into the system. It's the part that feels like a hassle, so it's the part that often gets skipped. And the difference is just night and day. Look here. On one side, you have governed input. It's validated, it's standardized. This is how you build trust. But on the other side, it's just chaos. You've got inconsistent formats, missing information, no way to track where it came from. This is the root cause of so many failures because it basically guarantees that your results are going to be corrupted down the line. And that's why thinking of input as just data entry is such a massive mistake. As this quote says, it's the foundation of integrity. If you don't have solid input, your entire analysis is basically built on sand. Okay, so let's move on to the second link in the chain: the process. You can think of this as the engine of your system. This is where all that raw material we just talked about gets transformed into something useful. To put it simply, the process is just the set of actions you perform on the input. It's the algorithm, it's the script, it's that series of steps that takes your raw data and starts to shape it into something that actually makes sense. Now, a really strong process has three key qualities. It's got to be transparent, so you can actually see what's happening inside. It has to be repeatable, so you get the same answer every single time you run it. And of course, it should be efficient, so it doesn't waste everyone's time and resources. And again, the contrast here is just so stark. A transparent process is documented, you can audit it, it builds trust. But on the other side, you have the black box process, where the logic is hidden and nobody knows what's going on. That just creates suspicion. I mean, if you can't explain how you got an answer, why should anyone believe it? So the key takeaway here is this: your process is the engine that drives reliability. And if that engine is a total mystery, then you have zero reliability. It has to be something you can see, something you can understand, and something you can run over and over again with total confidence. And that brings us to the final link in our chain: the output. This is the grand finale, the culmination of all that work. It's the report, the dashboard, the final number. And frankly, it's the only part of the system that most people are ever going to see. So the output is that tangible thing you deliver to your stakeholders. It's the answer to the question you started with. Maybe it's a sales forecast, or a customer satisfaction score, or an alert that something might be fraudulent. Now, for an output to be worth anything at all, it needs to be accurate, of course. But that's not enough. It also has to be clear, presented in a way that people can actually understand without a PhD. And finally, it has to be usable. Because if an answer is technically correct but nobody can figure out what to do with it, it's still a failure. And you can see the two paths it can go down. A good, actionable output gives you context, it helps you make smart decisions, it actually creates value. But a misleading output, with confusing charts and zero context, that just leads to bad conclusions and completely destroys the credibility of your entire system. And that's the bottom line. Your output is the face of your system. And if that face is flawed, it doesn't matter how great your input or your process was. The whole chain and your reputation with it loses all credibility.
So let's look at what happens when this all goes wrong. Here's a classic example of how a failure in just one of these links creates a domino effect that just brings the whole thing crashing down.
Okay, imagine a fraud detection system. It all starts with weak input, transaction logs that are incomplete and have no governance. Because that input is bad, the process, that fancy detection algorithm, starts making mistakes. It's misclassifying transactions left and right, and the end result of all that? A corrupt output. The dashboard actually misleads the compliance officers, the very people it's supposed to be helping, and maybe lets real fraud slip right through.
And really, it all comes down to this one simple truth. It doesn't matter if two of your links are made of solid steel. If you have one weak link, whether it's your input, your process, or your output, the entire chain is broken.
So that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. As you look at the systems that you use and rely on every single day, from the simplest to the most complex, just take a second to ask yourself, where is my weakest link?